Are we talking the best player in the country here? How good could Darryn Peterson be this season? And what does past history tell us about what Kansas fans should expect from the number one recruit in the country?
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on? Derek Johnson here. This is Locked On Jayhawks. Thanks for making it your first listen every day. Thank you to everydayers catching each and every episode of the show. We're free and available anywhere you get your podcasts, including on our YouTube page where you can like and subscribe to the show. And on today's edition of Locked On Jayhawks, we're talking Darryn Peterson, everybody's favorite incoming KU basketball recruit. Just how good could he be for this Kansas season? We'll get into a little bit on what history tells us about just what to expect from him from a production output and how good he could possibly be as well as what team impact could he have on this Kansas team, and if he's the best player in the country versus if he's just a good player, how different will the season be for KU based on those things kind of happening. Before we get into any of that, today's episode of the show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins with FanDuel. Okay, so Darryn Peterson, if you've been living under a rock for these past several months, is the number one recruit in the country. For a while, he was the number two recruit in the country on 24/7 Sports. They jumped him to number one. I guess if you're looking at On 3, he's the number three player in the country, which is a little silly to me. But anyway, Peterson is one of the best players in the country. Some places are seeing him as being the number one pick for the 2026 NBA draft. But there's several guys who, when you look at Boozer, when you look at DeBonsa, when you look at Peterson, they're guys that right now are in the running for that number one pick right now, to where this could be a good competitive class for who that kind of ends up being. And so I want to take a look at this in a couple ways. One, I want to take a look at, how have past number one recruits on 24/7 Sports, how have they done in their first year at college? But I also want to look at, from a broader scope, how have the number one combo guard, shooting guard types, point guard types, how have they done in their first year of college basketball? Because, maybe in some situations, if the number one player in the country is a center versus if the number one player is a wing versus if it's guard, maybe you get some different things to start with there. So let's take a look here at past number one point guard combo guards in the country. Let's just look at the last 10. And yes, arbitrary cutoff, whatever. That it discludes guys like Kyrie Irving and Andrew Harrison, but 10's a nice and an easy round number. So let's do this. I'm also only going to look at their first year when I go over these, because for the sake of Darryn Peterson, the expectation is to be a 1 year guy. So it doesn't make sense to look at, if this guy had to stay in college for 2 years, how do you do in his second year? No, I want to look at their freshman season, because that's what's going to be applicable to Kansas with Darryn Peterson. Okay, so let's start this most recent year. Number one combo guard, whatever, in the class was Dylan Harper, number one guard, whatever. Harper was number 3 overall. He goes to Rutgers, and he averages almost 20 points per game, 4.6 rebounds, 4 assists per game. He shoots 48% from the floor, 33% from three, 75 from the foul line. Now he's projected to be a top 5 pick in the NBA draft. Now, Rutgers did not make it to the NCAA tournament, but that has more to do with what's around him, because clearly that was a great season. If I told you right now Darryn Peterson would average 19.5 points, 4.6 rebounds, 4 assists per game on 48, 33, 75 splits, I would say, yeah, I would probably sign up for that right now, right? Then you have Isaiah Collier the year before, which that one becomes a little bit more interesting, maybe more of a down recruiting class, but number one guard there. He goes to USC, and I think he had some injury stuff throughout the season, so USC wasn't very good. But he had injury stuff. He averaged 16.3 points, 4.3 assists per game, shot 49 from the field, 34 from three. 2022, Nick Smith. This was not a great one. Number one guard goes to Arkansas. He averages 12.5 points per game. He also had to deal with injury stuff, but he only shoots 38% from the field, 34 from three, to 17 games. Now, Arkansas made the Sweet 16. Wasn't much because of him. He kind of struggled. I don't think he played well in that Kansas game specifically. Go back the year before. Now we start to get to some better names again. Kennedy Chandler, he was number 9 overall, though. By the way, Nick Smith was the number 1 overall recruit, too. Chandler was the number 1 guard, number 9 overall recruit, goes to Tennessee. They get a 3 seed. They make the second round of the tournament. He averaged 14 points, almost 5 assists per game, shot 46 from the floor, 38 from three. So good production there. Year before, Cade Cunningham. He was the number 1 overall recruit and number 1 guard, 20 points, over 6 rebounds, 3.5 assists per game. He shoots 44 from the floor, 40 from three, 85 from the foul line. And Oklahoma State, which, I mean, I think this is the only NCAA tournament appearance we've seen from Oklahoma State since, would you have to go back as far as Marcus Smart? There's got to be a team since then, besides the Cade Cunningham team. Anyway, it hasn't been a lot of NCAA tournament appearances for Oklahoma State of late outside of the Cade Cunningham year. And they got a 5 seed. That's how good he was. 2019, Cole Anthony, he did not have great team success in North Carolina. They were just 14 and 19. But good individual counting stats, 18.5 points, 5.7 rebounds, 4 assists per game. Shooting split's not great. 38 from the floor. 35 from three is solid, though. Then 2018, the number one guard, you might recognize this guy was Quentin Grimes. Goes to Kansas. He averages 8.4 points per game, 38, 34, 60 splits for a Kansas team that gets a 4 seed and felt like it kind of underachieved. Go back the year before, 2017, Colin Sexton. He goes to Alabama. He averages 19.2 points per game, 45, 34, 78 splits to help Bama go to the second round of the tournament. Then we go back to Markelle Fultz the year before that. I mean, Fultz hasn't had maybe as big of an NBA career as being the number one pick, but like he was an All-American in college. He was the number one pick for a reason. 23 points, 6 assists, almost 6 rebounds per game on 48, 41, 65 splits. And then the last guy going back 10 years, Malik Newman. He was at Mississippi State, 11.3 points, 39 from the floor, 38 from three on a 14 and 17 team. And so what I find interesting here, like if I go back and look at those 10, the number one guards in these classes, I would deem 5 of the 10 as home runs. Kennedy Chandler was a home run. He was one of the best guards in the country. Cade Cunningham was one of the best players in the country. Colin Sexton was one of the best guards in the country. Markelle Fultz was one of the best players in the country. And Harper was one of the best guards in the country. He was just on a not very good team. And again, if we went back even further, like if we went back and did last 15 years instead of last 10 years, we'd be adding Kyrie Irving. We'd be adding John Wall, who were like, you know, I don't think Kyrie was an All-American because he was injured throughout most of the season, but like first team All-American talents, like John Wall was an All-American. Then I would give one player a double. That would be Collier. Like the stats are good for Collier, 16.3 points, 4.3 assists, 49, 34 splits. But he got injured, you know. So like if he doesn't get injured, he plays a full season, has a good season, leads USC to the tournament. Maybe that's a home run too. I don't know. There were 4 players, though, that were relatively productive, low-efficiency players. Nick Smith, Quentin Grimes, Cole Anthony, and Malik Newman. But none of them were just total duds. So, like, I don't think you come into it, not that anybody was expecting this to be a total dud, but that is a higher percentage than you might have hoped. That, like, yeah, 4 of those 10, you know, maybe some of them ended up having good careers afterwards. Like Cole Anthony's had a solid career in the NBA after. Quentin Grimes had a really solid career after Kansas and now in the NBA. Malik Newman ended up having success afterwards at Kansas. But those guys didn't have that in year one. And based on how you've built the roster and built this team, you need Darryn Peterson to have success in year one right away. So that is a little bit scary, the number there. One thing that I do find interesting, though, is like with Peterson, his size at 6'5" with like a 6'10" wingspan is just different than a lot of the other guys on this list. Like with Cade Cunningham, he was bigger. Now Quentin Grimes was bigger, but he was being asked to be more of an off guard at Kansas as opposed to being an on guard. Isaiah Collier, a little bit smaller. Like I think Nick Smith was like 6'3", something like that. Like the size does matter here that he's on that other end. But overall, you average it up for all of those players. The last 10, 16.1 points, 4.2 rebounds, 3.6 assists, 1.2 steals per game on 44% from the field, 36 from three, 72 at the foul line. Those are pretty solid numbers. And again, you could add some interesting players if you go back to 5 before that. But if I gave you those numbers for, I mentioned the numbers for Harper, and you might take those if that's what it was for Peterson, but would you take those numbers, the average of what the last 10 are, the 16.1 points per game, like that I could be fine taking because on a Bill Self team, we don't see a lot of guys average north of 20 points per game. Then again, there's not that other obvious, like who's going to be the second leading scorer on this Kansas team right now, to where maybe you would expect more points per game. The rebounds, I would expect more than 4.2 from Peterson, to be honest. But it'd probably be around there. The 3.6 assists per game, if he's going to be the point guard, I would expect more. The 1.2 steals per game, 0.4 blocks, like that might be in line. The shooting splits, I almost expect more on the field goal percentage of 44. The 3-point percentage, freshmen sometimes struggle from 36, you take it. The free throw line, I probably expect more for 72 there. So it is a little bit different when you're talking about number one overall recruits, and that's what Peterson is. So let's compare him to number one recruits as opposed to just number one guards next. This episode of the show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. The NBA playoffs are in full swing, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot, a breakout player, Alex Caruso constantly hugging Nikola Jokic, there's never been a better time to get in on the action. FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live. With player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays, fans have more ways than ever to play smart and to win big. You can get action on the Western Conference Finals where Anthony Edwards and the Thunder are going at it. They went 2-2 against each other in the regular season. Should be a lot of fun. You have the depth, the size of the Thunder. You have the star power of Anthony Edwards, and it's going to be interesting because you have a bunch of teams. When you look at the other side too, with the Pacers and the Knicks, that either haven't won the finals or haven't won it in a very, very long time. In the case of the Knicks, and you can get in on the action to make it a little bit more exciting for you if you don't necessarily have, a team that you're rooting for right now. New to FanDuel too, it's the perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com and place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA and the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks for joining us on this episode of Locked On Jayhawks, talking about Darryn Peterson. Okay, so we went over the guards, and there were some very good ones. There were other ones that, were you probably would be expecting a lot more than that, and things wouldn't be going super well for Kansas if that was the case this season, if that's how things kind of turned out for him. So what about if we compare, because it's different just saying, okay, you're the number one guard versus being the number one overall player. Like, there's another level you have to get to that point. So how about if we compare Peterson to every player that 24/7 Sports has ranked as their number one player in their recruiting ranking. So 24/7 Sports goes back to the class of 2011 for college basketball, and the first top-ranked player, they did a pretty good job, is some dude named Anthony Davis, who ended up being first-team All-American, first-team All-SEC, National Player of the Year, National Champion. Doesn't get much better than that. I think I would take that season for Darryn Peterson. So then you go the next year. Kentucky gets him again. It's Nerlens Noel. Now, things went very differently for Nerlens Noel. He was first-team All-SEC. He was a very good college player. Ended up, getting drafted in the NBA and had a nice little NBA career, but didn't have the team success. Then you go the year after, might recognize this guy's name, Andrew Wiggins, who I know there's still some fans that are like, I feel this, I don't know, I felt like it wasn't worth the hype. And I always felt like that was unfair to Wiggins. The hype was that he's just going to come in and be LeBron James, that he's going to come in and be the best player in the country. He was a second-team All-American, and I know it didn't end well. He did have a bad game in his final game at KU, and it sucked the way he went out. But, he was second-team All-American, first-team All-Big 12. By that notion, he was a top 10 player in the country as a freshman. It's not his... if he would have been on a team that had a supporting piece around him, Ben McLemore, even though he redshirted, so it's a little different, got to have Jeff Withey and, some other pieces around him that were coming back, right? Andrew Wiggins, you're asked to be the leader, and that wasn't really in his game. But anyway, that doesn't need to be here nor there. 2014 was Emmanuel Mudiay. He played overseas, though. For what it's worth, I'm not going to count this one, but if we did, Karl Anthony Towns was number 2 there, so he would have actually been the number 1 college player, and that went pretty well because they were undefeated until the Final Four, and Cat has had a long NBA career and obviously was a very good player. 2015 was Ben Simmons. I know all sorts of the jump shot jokes and the recent stuff with it. He was an unbelievable player at the start of his NBA career and in college. He was a first-team All-American. He was All-SEC first team. 2016, 24/7 gave Josh Jackson the number 1 nod, and he ended up being first-team All-Big 12. He ended up being a third-team All-American. 2017 was Marvin Bagley, and that one worked out okay. First-team All-SEC and first-team All-American. 2018, Duke again. RJ Barrett, first-team All-American and All-ACC first team. 2019, we just mentioned Anthony Edwards in the FanDuel ad read. He, interestingly enough, was one of the few guys who wasn't first-team All-Conference. He was second-team All-SEC, but that's one where I'm just looking at it and I'm like, and the more I look back on it, I'm like, how did you end up at Georgia? You know what I mean? How did that happen? He didn't have the supporting cast around him, though. That year when Kansas won the Maui Invitational, one of the best, I don't know, maybe the best performance of just an individual in that. I mean, Doak and Dotson were nails in that Maui Invitational final, and Obi Toppin and all sorts of great performances. But Among all of them, Anthony Edwards, I forget if it was the Michigan State game or what. I don't even know if they won the game, but like he put up this ridiculous performance. It might have been the best that was there in a precursor of his NBA career. 2020, we mentioned Cade Cunningham earlier. He was first team All-American, first team All-Big 12. 2021, the number one recruit was Chet Holmgren. He was obviously first team All-WCC. He was a second team All-American for the number one overall seed. Now, 2022 is Nick Smith. We mentioned him earlier. And honestly, going through this list, probably the biggest bust of anybody on this list. Ron Holland was 2023. He played overseas, ended up being a top 10 pick for the Detroit Pistons. And then this past year, Cooper Flagg, which, yeah, that one worked out too. First team All-American, All-ACC first team, and National Player of the Year. So just to total it up, there were 14 players, I believe. Yes, 14 players before Darryn Peterson. So from 2011 to 2024 that earned 24/7 Sports number one recruit in the country. 2 of them played overseas. So that leaves us with 12 players who were 24/7's number one player and played college basketball. 11 of the 12 players were first or second team all conference. And ironically, the one guy who wasn't a first or second team all conference, or one of the guys who wasn't a first team all conference was Anthony Edwards. The other one obviously being Nick Smith. But that means 10 of the 12 were first team all conference players. And again, Anthony Edwards, who's one of the best players in the NBA, is actually one of the guys who was not one of the 10 of 12 who was first team all conference among number one recruits in the 24/7 era. 9 of the 12 were AP All-Americans among the ones who went to college. And 6 of the 12, so half, were first team All-Americans. 2 of them were National Player of the Year, okay? So basically what you're saying here is by getting that distinction, by earning that label through your play and what you are in Darryn Peterson, you basically have a coin flip situation of if he's going to be a first team All-American or not. You basically have much more than a coin flip situation of him being some sort of All-American. And so, like, if you look at it through that lens, I mean, the expectations that we're putting on Darryn Peterson, it is scary. It is dangerous to put all these, put the world on a kid who's coming in as a freshman. It's deserved, man, and I think he does live up to the hype. And now, what does that hype look like? What does it look like production-wise? Again, if you take, a lot of those different players, production-wise, it looks a lot differently. Like Anthony Davis got to be the, 5th leading scorer or something like that on his team. Cooper Flagg was playing next to 2 other top 20 picks in the draft with Common Malawach and Con Kneppel. You know what I mean? So, like, I don't think Darryn Peterson has that. Now, Flory is good enough. He could be another first-round pick he's playing next to, and there could be some good role players. And who knows what other players KU still is going to grab in either the portal or overseas at this point in time. But point being, the list of number one, like Nick Smith is the one guy on there where you're just like, yeah, that one was weird or that one didn't really work. All of the rest of them, like you're telling me, like you could just put them in a hat and pull one out and be like, okay, would you take this season from Darryn Peterson? Would you take the, remove the team success stuff, right? Because that is dependent on what else is around you. But like, would you take the Cade Cunningham season? It's like, of course you would take that from him. And a lot of the other guys have kind of been in that range. So I think that makes me feel even better about where we're at with Darryn Peterson. Now, as far as where he is on this list, depending if he's, second team All Big 12 versus being first team All-American and National Player of the Year, how different does that work out into the team success for Kansas based on the rest of the roster they've built around him? We'll talk about that next. Thanks for joining us on this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. You can find our show anywhere you get your podcast, including on our YouTube page. Don't forget to make Locked On College Basketball, Locked On College Football, your second listen every day. Okay, so let's say the different scenarios out there that Darryn Peterson, how good is he on this scale of goodness for KU this upcoming season? Like if we're to go look at and say, okay, well, Anthony Davis, and Cooper Flagg were National Player of the Year. If Darryn Peterson is a National Player of the Year, because Kansas has built the roster to this point in time to be very friendly to Darryn Peterson in terms of building it with a lot of role players to surround Darryn Peterson. So if Peterson is National Player of the Year good, and there is a certain level of team success that has to come with that, so that would, it's kind of what fuels the other there. But if he's National Player of the Year good, I mean, Kansas is one of the, they're certainly one of the 10 best teams in the country, or they're one of the 5 best teams in the country, because if you think back to like, I guess we go back to like the The 2010 Kansas team, 2009-2010 team. I know that didn't go well. They lose in the second round of the tournament to Northern Iowa, but that was the number one overall seed in the tournament for a reason. They were one of the best teams in the country, if not the best team in the country, up until that point, up until that happened, right? Maybe that's the wrong one to pick because that one did have really good depth. You had younger versions of players like Tyshawn Taylor and the Morse twins. If we go back the year before, though, you go back to the 08-09 team. That team makes the Sweet 16, wins the Big 12, gets a 3 seed. All very solid. Sharon Collins was an All-American guard. If Darryn Peterson is National Player of the Year, that's even better than what Collins did. As great as Collins was at Kansas, he wasn't National Player of the Year. And then you had Cole Aldridge, too, who, ended up being, I forget, I think Cole made like a third-team All-American one of his years. I can't remember if it was that year or the next year, but he was obviously one of the best players in the country at center, who was built mostly off the rebounding and defense, and that's kind of the idea with Flory. So, like, could Flory be a first-team All-Big 12 player? And if you get that from Peterson, okay, what were the rest of the pieces on that 08-09 team? You're talking about freshman players who, were they ready? How good were they going to be? Or role player types kind of filling out the roster similar to this one, except, maybe some of the role players on this team have a little bit more juice to them, even though maybe you don't have the freshmen with the high ceiling of the Tyshawn Taylors and the Morris twins, right? So it gets kind of interesting here. But if you're saying National Player of the Year, yes, I think for sure that team to me would be one of the top 10 in the country at that point in time. Versus if Darryn Peterson, and again, we still got to wait on the other roster additions for KU, but then the next list down the line is like, what if Peterson is like Andrew Wiggins level, where he's second-team All-American, you see some flashes, you see some unbelievable games, unbelievable moments, overall has a really productive season, but it still kind of leaves you wanting a little bit more. Where would that put Peterson? And where would that put KU? I think at that point in time, like maybe you're looking at Kansas being more of a 3 or a 4 seed, like if you put that version of Wiggins on this year's Kansas team, yeah, what do they get? I don't know, 3 or 4 seed. And then the next level is like, okay, what if he's second team All Big 12, where it's like you see the talent, but it's just not very efficient and there's other issues, yada, yada, yada. At that point, are we getting in the range of Kansas being where they were this past season, where they were a 7 seed? Or is the fact that you just built a team with more of an identity of athleticism and defense and Bill Self and dog mentality, is that enough to at least get a 5 or a 6 seed at that point in time? That's kind of where I would view it from this point. But like, if Peterson is National Player of the Year good and Flory is first round pick good, and you add another player in the portal who, is another stud, at that point, then you are talking about one of the 5 best teams in the country. And so, yeah, things will very much ride on how good Darryn Peterson is this season for KU. But after going over some of those past examples, you should feel confident that Darryn Peterson is going to have a big year, because I know I certainly will. All right, that'll do it for this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. You can find our show anywhere you get your podcasts, including on our YouTube page. See you next time with LOJ.